Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly command respect while others perpetually struggle for recognition? The uncomfortable truth is that weakness isn't something that happens to you, it's something you choose. Every moment of hesitation, every plea for approval, every desperate attempt to be understood, is a conscious decision to surrender your power to others. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something that most people refuse to accept. The world doesn't reward the meek, the honest, or the fair. It rewards those who understand the game and play it with calculated precision. Weakness in all its forms is simply the result of refusing to acknowledge this fundamental reality. Consider how you present yourself to the world. When you explain your decisions, justify your actions, or seek validation for your choices, you're broadcasting your insecurity to everyone around you. The strong don't explain, they act. They don't seek permission, they take what they need. They don't hope for understanding, they make others adapt to their reality. The most dangerous illusion we've been sold is that vulnerability equals strength, that showing your emotions, sharing your struggles, and being authentic will somehow earn you respect. This is perhaps the greatest lie ever told to those who could otherwise claim power. Vulnerability isn't strength, it's ammunition you're handing to your enemies. Think about the people you truly respect in your life. Not the ones you pity or feel sorry for, but the ones who command genuine respect. They share a common trait. They never let you see them sweat. They maintain composure under pressure. They make decisions without excessive consultation. And they accept both success and failure with equal dignity. They've chosen strength where others have chosen weakness. The choice between strength and weakness presents itself countless times throughout each day. When someone challenges your authority, do you defend yourself with desperate explanations, or do you respond with the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove anything? When faced with a difficult decision, do you agonize publicly over every possible outcome, or do you gather information quietly and act decisively? Machiavelli observed that the prince who seeks to be loved above all else will ultimately be neither loved nor respected. The desire to be liked is perhaps the most crippling weakness of all. It makes you predictable, manipulable, and ultimately disposable. Those who choose strength understand that respect is far more valuable than affection, and that fear, properly applied, is more reliable than love. But choosing strength doesn't mean becoming cruel or heartless. It means understanding that the world operates according to certain immutable laws, and those who ignore these laws do so at their own peril. One of these laws is that people respect what they cannot easily obtain or control. When you make yourself too available, too understanding, too accommodating, you diminish your own value in the eyes of others. The weak believe that if they just try hard enough, if they're just good enough, if they just care enough, the world will reward their effort. They mistake activity for achievement, good intentions for results, and hope for strategy. The strong understand that results are the only currency that matters, and that the world cares little for your struggles if you have nothing to show for them. Consider how you handle conflict. The weak avoid confrontation at all costs, believing that peace at any price is preferable to the discomfort of standing their ground. They sacrifice their principles for temporary harmony, not realizing that each compromise makes them weaker and more vulnerable to future exploitation. The strong understand that some battles must be fought, not because they enjoy conflict, but because backing down signals weakness to everyone watching. Every time you apologize for something that wasn't your fault, every time you accept blame to keep the peace, every time you make excuses for your failures instead of learning from them, you're choosing weakness. These choices compound over time, creating a pattern that others learn to exploit. People begin to see you as someone who can be pushed around, someone who will always give in, someone whose needs can be safely ignored. The transformation from weakness to strength begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you must recognize that you have more control over your situation than you've been willing to acknowledge. Instead of hoping for others to treat you better, you must command better treatment through your actions and boundaries. Strength is not about aggression or dominance over others. It's about dominance over yourself. It's about making decisions based on logic rather than emotion, about acting according to your principles rather than others' expectations, about pursuing your goals regardless of who approves or disapproves. The strongest people are those who need the least from others, because they've learned to provide for themselves. Machiavelli taught that it's better to be feared than loved, but he also understood that the best leaders inspire both fear and respect simultaneously. They make others want to be on their side while making it clear that crossing them would be costly. This balance is achieved not through threats or intimidation, but through consistent demonstration of competence, reliability, and unwavering standard. The weak constantly signal their desperation through their behavior. They over-explain, overshare, and over-apologize. They send lengthy messages when a few words would suffice. They offer justifications when none were requested. They seek reassurance for decisions they should be confident about. Every one of these behaviors screams weakness to anyone paying attention. Contrast this with how the strong operate. They speak when they have something worth saying, and remain silent when they don't. They make requests rather than plead. They state their position clearly and then wait for others to respond. They don't chase people who don't return their energy. They don't beg for opportunities that should be earned through merit. The path from weakness to strength requires you to make uncomfortable choices. You must be willing to be misunderstood rather than explain yourself to everyone. You must be willing to be seen as difficult rather than accommodate every unreasonable request. You must be willing to lose people who only valued you for what you could do for them. One of the most liberating realizations you can have is that most people's opinions of you are based on their own insecurities and limitations, not on your actual worth. The person who criticizes your ambition is often someone who gave up on their own dream. The person who calls you selfish for having boundaries is usually someone who has none. Understanding this frees you from the exhausting task of trying to manage everyone's perception of you. Strength also means accepting responsibility for your choices without making excuses. When something goes wrong, the weak immediately look for someone else to blame, or circumstances to explain away their failure. The strong acknowledge their role in the outcome, learn what they can from the experience, and adjust their approach going forward. This response builds credibility and trust, while making excuses destroys both. The economic reality of our world is that value flows toward those who are perceived as valuable. If you present yourself as desperate, needy, or grateful for any scrap of attention, you signal low value. If you present yourself as someone with options, standards, and alternatives, you signal high value. This isn't about arrogance or pretense. It's about recognizing and communicating your worth appropriately. Consider how you negotiate in any context, whether it's salary, relationships, or simple daily interactions. The weak negotiate from a position of scarcity, grateful for whatever they can get. They accept the first offer, agree to unfavorable terms, and convince themselves they should be thankful for the opportunity. The strong negotiate from a position of abundance, understanding that there are always alternatives and that walking away is sometimes the best strategy. This principle extends to every area of life. In relationships, the weak cling desperately to anyone who shows them attention, terrified of being alone and willing to tolerate disrespect to avoid abandonment. The strong understand that being alone is infinitely preferable to being with someone who doesn't value you, and this understanding gives them the power to demand better treatment. The weak believe that hard work alone will be rewarded, not understanding that the world is full of hard-working people who never achieve their goal. The strong understand that work must be strategic, that effort must be directed toward results that matter, and that perception is often as important as reality. They don't just work hard, they work smart, and they ensure that their efforts are visible to the right people. Machiavelli's most profound insight was that human nature is fundamentally selfish and that successful leaders must account for this reality rather than hoping it isn't true. People will generally act in their own self-interest, and those who understand this can predict and influence behavior more effectively than those who believe in inherent human goodness. This doesn't mean you should become cynical or assume the worst of everyone. It means you should be realistic about human motivation and structure your interactions accordingly. Instead of hoping people will do the right thing, create systems where doing the right thing serves their interests. Instead of trusting blindly, verify through observation and experience. The weak are constantly surprised when people let them down because they project their own values onto others. They assume that because they would keep a promise, others will too. Because they would show gratitude, others will as well. Because they value fairness, others share this value. The strong understand that people's actions are determined by their character, not by your expectations or their promises. Strength requires you to develop what Machiavelli called virtù, not virtue in the moral sense, but the practical wisdom to adapt your approach to circumstance. Sometimes this means being generous, sometimes it means being firm, sometimes it means being patient, sometimes it means acting quickly. The key is making these choices based on what will be most effective, not on what feels most comfortable or familiar. The weak often sabotage themselves by being too consistent, always nice, always accommodating, always available. This predictability makes them less valuable and easier to take advantage of. The strong maintain an element of unpredictability that keeps others engaged and respectful. They reward good behavior and have consequences for poor behavior, making their approval something worth earning. Perhaps the most crucial aspect of choosing strength is learning to be comfortable with other people's discomfort. The weak exhaust themselves trying to make everyone happy, not realizing that this is both impossible and counterproductive. The strong understand that some people will be unhappy with any decision you make, and that trying to please everyone guarantees pleasing no one. This doesn't mean being deliberately difficult or unpleasant. It means making decisions based on what's right or effective, rather than what will generate the least resistance. It means having difficult conversations when they're necessary rather than avoiding them until they become crises. It means setting and enforcing boundaries even when others don't like them. The transformation from weakness to strength is not a one-time decision but a series of daily choices. Each time you're faced with the option to explain yourself or remain mysterious, to seek approval or trust your judgment, to accommodate an unreasonable request or hold your ground, you have an opportunity to choose strength. These choices become easier with practice, but they never become automatic. The temptation to revert to weakness is always present, because weakness feels safer in the short term. It's easier to apologize than to stand firm. It's easier to agree than to argue. It's easier to go along than to lead. But these short-term comforts lead to long-term powerlessness. The most successful people in any field understand that their success depends not just on their skills or knowledge, but on how others perceive and respond to them. They cultivate an image of competence, reliability and strength that makes others want to work with them, invest in them, and follow their lead. This image isn't created through boasting or self-promotion, but through consistent demonstration of these qualities in action. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold, but he also understood that boldness must be calculated rather than reckless. True strength comes from making courageous decisions based on careful analysis, rather than making impulsive choices based on emotion. It's about taking calculated risks, rather than avoiding all risks, or taking foolish chances. The weak often mistake recklessness for strength, making dramatic gestures or extreme choices in an attempt to appear powerful. True strength is often quiet and understated, the confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever comes your way, rather than the bravado that comes from hoping others will be impressed by your performance. As you begin to choose strength over weakness, you'll notice that your relationships change. Some people who were comfortable with your previous weakness will resist your transformation, preferring the version of you that was easier to control or manipulate. This resistance is actually confirmation that you're moving in the right direction. New people will be attracted to your growing strength, individuals who respect competence and self-assurance, rather than neediness and desperation. These relationships will be more fulfilling and sustainable because they're based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided accommodation. The ultimate realization is that weakness was never protecting you from anything. It was actually exposing you to more danger. By trying to avoid conflict through weakness, you invited more conflict. By trying to be liked through accommodation, you became less likable. By trying to find security through dependence, you became more vulnerable. Strength, properly understood and applied, is actually the path to the security and respect you were seeking through weakness. But it requires you to give up the illusion that the world owes you anything, and accept that everything you want must be earned through competence, consistency, and strategic thinking. The choice is yours, and it's a choice you must make repeatedly, in small moments and large ones. Will you continue to choose weakness, hoping that somehow the rules don't apply to you? Or will you choose strength, accepting the world as it is, and positioning yourself to thrive within its realities? Remember, weakness is not your fate, your genetics, or your circumstances. Weakness is your choice, and that means strength is your choice too. The question is whether you'll have the courage to make